Now, the first case of a highly mutated coronavirus variant that first emerged in South Africa has been detected in Israel. At a cabinet meeting earlier today, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said the variant is more contagious and spreads more rapidly than the Delta variant. He also said authorities are still gathering information about whether or not it evades vaccines. Meanwhile, the high-profile corruption trial of former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has intensified. A former aide testified this week about his role in an alleged relationship between Netanyahu and owners of a major news company. Joining us now to talk about all of this and more is CBS News Radio correspondent Robert Berger. Robert, thank you so much. Let's start with the current Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett. He met with health experts to discuss how best to respond to this coronavirus variant. What measures are they taking? And remind us how the effort to vaccinate is going in Israel overall.
Well, the South African variant got here very quickly. Some Israelis, one Israeli for sure, coming back from Malawi, which is a country right near South Africa, has the virus, and there are a couple of other suspected cases. And basically, they're going to step up tests at the airport and even change those PCR tests to maybe make them more effective against this new variant. The Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, saying that Israel is on the threshold of an emergency situation. So there's definite concern. These people have been isolated who are suspected of having this virus. But having said that, Israel has a really high vaccination rate. You know, we have to wait and see if this new variant is resistant to the vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, which are being used here in Israel. But they're taking the necessary precautions. In the meantime, Israel has had one of the most successful vaccination campaigns in the world. And the country is open, wide open. You do need a so-called green passport showing that you're vaccinated to get into, say, restaurants or movie theaters and a few other public places. But basically, the country is open and doing quite well. But concerned, certainly concerned and taking precautions about this new variant.
Okay. And in other news, this high-profile corruption trial of the former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has continued, and it continued with testimony this week as a former spokesman and aide testified. Can you get us up to speed where we are on this trial? What did the spokesperson say, and what does this mean for Netanyahu?
Very dramatic testimony this week in that ongoing trial where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the former prime minister, accused of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. And this state prosecution star witness was once a Netanyahu spokesman and came out with very incriminating testimony this week of the former prime minister, basically backing the charges that Netanyahu gave millions of dollars in regulatory relief to the owner of Israel's largest telecom company, who also owns a popular news website, in exchange for more positive media coverage. Now, they even produced recordings of Netanyahu effectively ordering this guy, this media mogul, to change stories, what to add and what to delete. So he was heavily involved, apparently, in the editing process, which, of course, makes him look bad. But the charges, the serious charges, are that he actually gave favors in exchange for that more positive media coverage.
That's quite serious. Okay. And in other very serious news, earlier this week, a Palestinian teacher shot and killed an Israeli tour guide near one of the holiest sites in Jerusalem. What can you tell us about this attack, and what security measures have been put in place to try and stop these kinds of attacks in the future?
So this Palestinian from East Jerusalem went into the old city near the Mosque of Al-Aqsa, or Temple Mount, that flashpoint of conflict. Whenever anything happens around there, you know, it's very dangerous. But what was different about this attack, I mean, we do see occasional stabbings in the old city, sometimes a shooting, but this man was armed with a submachine gun. And he was quickly killed by Israeli security forces on the scene. But to bring a submachine gun into the old city, into a volatile place like the Mosque of Al-Aqsa, that is a very dangerous situation. It turns out that he was a member of the Islamic militant group Hamas. Now, he's also a resident of Jerusalem, meaning he has Israeli ID. He can move around freely, and that makes this kind of attack very hard to prevent.
Right, because I've been to the old city. It's a maze of old corridors and very narrow kind of alleys. Are they setting up security checkpoints? I mean, how would you even stop someone from being able to access that area? Is that something they're looking into?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you would think that there would be metal detectors or some kind of security like that in order to bring weapons into the old city, but there aren't. And the reason is because there's a status quo agreement regarding the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the third holiest place in Islam, and the Israelis really aren't allowed to establish those kind of security checks at the mosque, in or around the mosque, which really means someone who wants to do something like this probably can do it. And so what you really need is good intelligence. But this man was a teacher. He was actually financed by the Israeli municipality itself. So it is difficult to prevent these kind of attacks. And because of the sensitivity of the place, those kind of security checks that you might see elsewhere, you don't have them at the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Well, similarly, Israeli security forces arrested dozens of members of a Hamas cell. How were security forces able to locate them? Did they have better intelligence in that case? And what more can you tell us about those arrests? Who were those people?
They were monitoring this group for a long time. 50 Hamas militants from the West Bank. And basically, they uncovered a large cache of weapons, including pistols, assault rifles, ammunition, and most disturbing, 4 suicide bomb belts. Now, that's reminiscent of the Second Palestinian Uprising from 2000 to 2004, when there were a lot of suicide bombings in Israel, basically Palestinians putting on a vest and blowing themselves up in crowded places. According to the Israeli authorities, they were planning these kind of attacks here in Jerusalem and elsewhere. I think when the shooting attack took place in Jerusalem, they had been monitoring the group for a while. They decided they wanted to go ahead and arrest them, fearing that other attacks might be imminent.
Robert Berger breaking it down for us in Jerusalem. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.